Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. I am your host, John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about 1987's Full Metal Jacket and its Warner Brothers 4K Blu-ray that is going to be getting a re-release here in 2025. But before we get into that 4K Blu-ray review, I always like to give a quick film review, and today is no different. So if you don't want to know anything about the film Full Metal Jacket, and you're just here for that 4K Blu-ray review, you guys can skip ahead to that right now. So back in 1987, Stanley Kubrick released his second to last film. His last film came out 12 years later in 1999, Eyes Wide Shut. But in 1987, he directed one of his greatest films of all time, which is saying something because Stanley Kubrick, almost all of his films are considered masterpieces at this point. Full Metal Jacket is one of those. Most people probably remember R. Lee Ermey's performance in this movie because that really set off his career that you would see throughout the rest of the 1980s.
Stand back. Sir, yes, sir! Private Joker, why did you join my beloved corps? Sir, to kill, sir!
And of course, he'd pop up in so many films in the 1990s, like Seven. And I also really love his comedic performance in Saving Silverman. But you always knew the voice. He also did a lot of voice work. But this is the movie that made him famous playing the drill sergeant in the first half of this film. But it also has other great performances like Adam Baldwin and Matthew Modine as Private Joker. Another character that people really remember about this movie is Private Pyle, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who is still in the limelight thanks to Daredevil. But this is the movie that made him famous. He put on all that weight. He was scary as hell. You believed that this guy was Private Pyle, and you felt bad for the guy, and you kind of understood like what this guy was going through. And the movie itself, it's another horrific look at the Vietnam War. A lot of great directors of this time were putting out their own Vietnam films. Francis Ford Coppola, a few years before this, put out what I consider to be the greatest war film of all time in Apocalypse Now, but Full Metal Jacket isn't that far behind it. One thing about the Vietnam War is that you really concentrate on the darkness of the war. Like World War II, it was like overcoming the enemy, overcoming the evil, whereas the Vietnam War, it's like, who is the enemy? Are we the enemy here? In the Vietnamese people, we are their enemy, and you can see that throughout this film because everyone just believes that they're doing the right thing. But we open this movie on our soldiers cutting their hair. They're about to go into boot camp. That's where we're introduced to R. Lee Ermey's character, who is a gunnery sergeant. He is the head of this group of soldiers. He's got to turn them into men, and everyone seems pretty on board with that. He's, ripping them apart. I love Private Snowball in this section too. This guy's energy is great. He was made for the Corps, and you could just see that. But then we're also introduced to like Vincent D'Onofrio's character of who gets called Private Pyle, and you can see this overweight guy. He clearly is going to be the guy that's going to take a lot of effort to turn him into that killing machine. Like, they want to turn Marines into killing machines. They make sure to let you know that up front. Like, essentially, we're going to wash away all of your emotions and make you into that killer. And, this character, he's the really interesting part of the whole first half of the movie. Just seeing, is he going to break? What's going to happen? Is he going to break him? Private Joker's right there, who we love so much throughout this entire film. He's really the main character of our film through the first and second half, so we get to see his training here. We get to see that he's a very independent thinker. He's not going to be broken that easy. Even through everything that's going to be happening here in boot camp, he's still got that sense of humor with him. He doesn't take everything these guys are saying too seriously. He's always got a sarcastic comeback to it. He can kind of see through all of the bullshit, while other people, like Adam Baldwin's Animal Mother character, he might be able to see through the bullshit, but he's following his own code, and he's just out there to do what he wants to do. Where as Matthew Modine's character, he's very intelligent. He kind of can get the whole gist of this thing. He understands that this war, he's kind of trying to illustrate, and we'll see it through the second half, like the difference between the sides of the war, just the conflict of man in general, of, being these killing machines despite the fact we're supposed to be fighting for good. It makes a lot of sense throughout the entire film, and I really enjoyed Matthew Modine's performance, and it's a great choice for the lead actor. And of course, great 80s actor who would pop up later in Stranger Things as well. So Vincent D'Onofrio, Matthew Modine, still acting to this very day. So it's pretty cool to see them pop up in this movie and just give world-class performances. Most people, though, only do remember the boot camp scenes from the first half of the film, and then obviously building up to Vincent D'Onofrio's character's death in the bathroom. Stanley Kubrick, another thing about him, just loves those bathroom scenes, knows how to shoot them. They always look beautiful. But that scene is horrific when he kills the R. Lee Ermey character, then kills himself. And then we just quickly transition into the war itself. Right there, obviously, a lot of big quotes that come out of this that would be quoted in rap music throughout the 1990s at the very opening when the prostitute is coming over to Private Joker's character. This is where we first see the Private Joker. He's in the military, but he's kind of working for I believe it's the Stars and Stripes newspaper, which is like the military's form of media. Like, they essentially put out a paper for the soldiers, but of course, we learn very quickly it's just propaganda bullshit. Private Joker makes sure to point this out when they're like, they had a death in there. Like, they they really like that kind of stuff, the soldiers, and we got to keep them motivated. And he's like, okay, just let me know, which one do you like? Do you want it to be an officer? People really like an officer's death. People are laughing. And then this, of course, he gets sent out into the field, and this is where the movie, like, for me, really does take off. I think this is some of the best shot stuff in film history, which is crazy because it's shot in London, like 10 miles away from Stanley Kubrick's house. You would think it was actually shot in Vietnam, so it's very impressive. But of course, Stanley Kubrick liked to shoot things near his house in London after he left the United States, and it all looks so great. It's a beautiful looking film, great production design. Stanley Kubrick put these guys through the ringer, take after take after take, like he usually does, because he's a perfectionist. That's why the guy's only made so many movies, because the guy just has to always pay attention to every single tiny detail. And of course, you can't argue it, because look at the finished product. These actors, though, did say he put them through hell. But these sequences are so well done. Matthew Modine's character, we really get to explore his mindset of the war and what he sees. He starts to see guys like Private Cowboy, his buddy, the way he gets shot and the way he gets shot down. It's so fast. One of the most realistic deaths in film history. He gets shot. He can't believe that he was shot because he didn't even want to go this far, and now he's about to die. And then he dies so quick. The realistic nature of that death really does actually hurt you. I felt myself getting a little bit emotional just because we had seen Private Cowboy from the beginning of this film. You kind of didn't expect him to die like that, but then he does. And as they keep moving in, and then we find out that the sniper is a kid, it makes you realize the horrific nature of war, and that it doesn't matter. Nobody wins in war. War is a horrible thing. This kid thinks that she's doing the right thing, and she's going to die, and she knows she's going to die. She just wanted to take out as many soldiers as she possibly can. She's the hero of her story. She thinks that she's doing the right thing, just like all these soldiers think that they're doing the right thing. And then we build up to the ending, and it's a very beautiful ending with these soldiers marching with the flames going on behind them, just showing that they're still soldiers, still have to do what they have to do, no matter what horrificness is going on, including the fire of this town right on fire right next to them while they're marching along. There's just something very beautiful and poetic about the ending to this film. And I know that they had a hard time wrapping it up. Stanley Kubrick apparently even went to all that. I don't know exactly how to end this film, and they all kind of were throwing ideas at him. It's funny because it's Stanley Kubrick, but I think they wrapped it up very nicely, and I do think that this is one of the greatest Vietnam films of all time. Funny enough, the score was actually done by Stanley Kubrick's daughter, and I think that the emotional moments actually do need that score. It's not a very powerful, overwhelming score, but in certain moments, it really does do the job, and I really felt that throughout this film. So if you're somebody who's only seen Full Metal Jacket maybe once or twice, or you've heard about it and heard that the first half isn't as good as the second half, I disagree. Yes, the first half might be the better part of the movie, but the second half is essential to the entire film, and I think it's just as good as the first half. Just the first half has, like I said, those two powerful performances that just don't carry over to the second half, but that doesn't mean that the storytelling and the plot of the film isn't interesting enough to carry it throughout and make this one of Stanley Kubrick's best films that he's ever directed. But we're also here to talk about its 4K Blu-ray, so let's do that right now.
Most of you will go to Vietnam. Some of you will not come back.
And here it is, Full Metal Jacket on 4K Blu-ray. I believe this was released back in 2020, and I hadn't seen the 4K Blu-ray since. But since the 4K Steelbook, which was also released back in 2020, is going to be receiving a new re-release, I thought no better time than now to recheck out this 4K Blu-ray, because I remember it being very good. And a lot of people also talk about Stanley Kubrick movies coming to 4K Blu-ray, like 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining. A lot of people, including myself, consider some of the best 4K Blu-rays ever released. But Full Metal Jacket never comes up. It came out around the same time. It's another Stanley Kubrick film released by Warner Bros. On 4K Blu-ray. You would think more people would talk about it. I'm like, well, maybe the quality wasn't as good as those two movies. Well, I disagree. I think Full Metal Jacket is a beautiful looking 4K Blu-ray, right in line with 2001: A Space Odyssey and The Shining, in my opinion. So if you haven't picked this one up, just right out of the gate, it's definitely worth the money just because it's a beautiful looking transfer as far as the visuals go. But what about the entire package? Like, I didn't get the Steelbook. I got the slipcover version, which is just fine for me. I like it. I love this, obviously, the artwork on the front. I think it works out pretty well. I like the white base of it. You come inside, you get one 4K Blu-ray disc and one Blu-ray disc. It's the previously released Blu-ray that's going to have all your extras on it. Not many extras to choose from, but there is a 30-minute making of documentary that I really enjoyed, and I can highly recommend it. It came out during the DVD era, but still you get interviews with, pretty much everyone you would hope to get interviews with, including Vincent D'Onofrio, which is great. He talks about how he had to gain about 80 pounds for this role. That was a big selling point of the role. Like, Vincent D'Onofrio had to commit to that. And it just shows you how good of an actor Vincent D'Onofrio is. Like, his range as being an actor. Like, he does The Player a few years after this. He's a thin guy. He's an asshole, smart ass. You really don't like the guy. And in this movie, you just feel so bad for it. It's hard to believe that this guy has this wide range that a lot of people, I feel like, don't give him credit for. I feel like he's kind of in the same vein as Philip Seymour Hoffman, but I think Philip Seymour Hoffman got the better roles. But I think as far as acting chops go, Vincent D'Onofrio is just as good and is also willing to do the work. Proven very much here, even though this is still probably his most famous role. The guy is a great actor. There's a reason why he's still working today, and he's always committed, and it's really cool to see him do his interview. Everybody does interviews, except for obviously Stanley Kubrick, who's passed away, but still, everyone talking about working with him. Really love that making of documentary. Just wish we would have got more. Like, that's really it. You get a trailer. It's a very old Blu-ray to begin with anyway. And then the audio. The audio is a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. It's pretty damn good. It's not the greatest Master Audio 5.1 I've ever heard, but it is also a very good one. And after all these years, it's still pretty good. Very well mixed. Everything comes in crisp and clear. You never have to raise your volume. You never have to lower your volume. So everything is mixed well. The dialogue comes in crisp and clear. And for a war movie like this, it would kind of be forgiven if like the special effects and the sound effects all shot up in the background and overwhelm the dialogue at points. But it really doesn't. It also doesn't really sound ADR that much at points. So very impressed with the audio. But again, it's not something that's going to blow your socks off. It's just very solid. Now the visuals, if you compare this 4K Blu-ray to the pack-in Blu-ray, it's night and day. That's what I'm talking about when people talk about the 4K Blu-rays of Stanley Kubrick. This really should be in the conversation because the previously released Blu-ray, it's faded as hell. It's very cold, like a lot of blues and grays, which is how the film always looked, but it's really not showing off the color of the film because there is a good amount of it, and that's one thing when we upgrade to 4K Blu-ray and we get that HDR10 over things. When we get into the war sequences in the second half and the orange flames, like, I mean, eye-grabbing stuff. And when you watch the previously released Blu-ray, you don't even really care about it. It's almost like in the background, even though fire plays a huge part of the production design and numerous sequences in the second half.
Oh, fire! Yeah.
You know, you kind of don't think about it as much watching the Blu-ray, but on the 4K Blu-ray, your eye gets drawn to it. It's just stunning how good a quality the 4K Blu-ray is. Every color looks more natural, more realistic. You know, the one thing is, honestly, I could say is they clear so much up. They did shoot this in London. They didn't actually shoot this in Vietnam. You might notice that it looks a little bit more like a set at points, like this one part where they're looking at like this blown out blue door, and it looks almost a little too clean, like a set. And that's stuff that your eyes won't get drawn to on the regular Blu-ray because, again, it looks so faded. Everything just kind of like blends into each other. You don't really get drawn into the beautiful visuals like you do in the 4K Blu-ray, but your 4K Blu-ray is so clear, your eyes get drawn to things that they've never gotten drawn to before, and you might notice stuff that looks really clear, something that I had an issue with the Platoon 4K Blu-ray, but it doesn't bother me here just because everything else still looks great, and it's probably something that they didn't think about, like when they were making the movie, like in 1987, watching this on home theaters, like in 1987, a home theater might have been like a VHS, I'm not even 100% sure, but probably like a VCR and like a 22-inch TV was probably like the main thing, right? So I don't think they were thinking about somebody looking at a blue door in the background and how clear that looks. So they probably thought, it's not a huge deal. But now when you look at it through 2025 eyes, you're like, yeah, it's a little bit clean, a little too clean. But I don't think Stanley Kubrick was thinking about that, despite the fact he is a huge perfectionist. But the visuals are just stunning. Like, really, Stanley Kubrick movies have translated so well to the 4K Blu-ray format, and Full Metal Jacket is no different. The only thing I can complain about, obviously, it's a Warner Brothers release. You don't really get that many extras. They do have the second Blu-ray disc in this release. I don't know if the re-release will have that. Warner Brothers has stopped with that second Blu-ray disc. I don't know, though, because there's no extras on that 4K Blu-ray disc, and I don't want to see that documentary just get lost to the wind. So let's hope that the re-release steelbook that's coming out does include that second Blu-ray disc. I hope so, because that documentary is pretty good, but it's definitely worth your time and money for this upgrade. I mean, even in like a $25 range, it's still really good just because the 4K Blu-ray quality is fantastic. And just rewatching this 4K Blu-ray reminded me how much I enjoy the movie Full Metal Jacket and how it is, in my opinion, a top 3 war film of all time, or a top 3 anti-war film of all time. Stanley Kubrick, very familiar with these, including Paths of Glory, which is also a great Stanley Kubrick film and 4K Blu-ray that I could highly recommend. But is it as good as Full Metal Jacket? That's tough. Full Metal Jacket is one of those classic films in the 1980s, and I always enjoy revisiting it. It's just one of those movies I always forget how good it really is. But if I was going to rate this 4K Blu-ray at a score of 1 to 10, I would give Full Metal Jacket a pretty damn solid 8 out of 10. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to like it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to share this video. And also, guys, we have channel membership. So if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like John Doe Juggalo, or a channel director like Uncle V, Nicholas Head, and Kevin Kruger, you could also do that. Or you could even become a bankroll member like Frank from Frank's Media Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato. But as always, guys, if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it at all. We just hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.